We've got a X5 diesel here. We've done a few videos and showed a few people how this goes. These lenses are very typical. You can polish these up a little bit, but they're usually just cracking down, they're breaking down. There's a lot of hazing and crazing. And essentially this creates a very bad platform for lighting performance. It also looks terrible. It ages the front of the vehicle. And we'll turn on the lights next to show you how the output is, but it essentially completely diffuses and reduces the light output once the assemblies are on. So we'll show you how the performance looks in just a moment. You can't even see through the lens essentially. So what this does is creates a lot of diffusion. It's not even, I can tell the driver's side is very weak. Maybe the bulb is going bad. It's hard to tell with this kind of system. But here's the output of the original projectors. And you can tell that needs a lot of love. And you can see how much light glare is above the cutoff where it shouldn't be. Because those housings, you can tell they look really bright. It's like an old school HID system essentially. In a reflector housing. It's creating so much glare, so much straight light, because it's not able to pass through the lens clearly. That just creates a big problem. And to provide a little bit more feedback on the intensity, on the original intensity of the lighting system, it's about 190 lux on the passenger side. That's the brighter side. Driver's side, it's hard to see where the hotspot is because it's dim and very diffused. We're only seeing about 120 lux, which is just a little bit brighter than some of our best fog light options these days. It's certainly not a good level to be at. It's quite dangerous actually. And this will all get fixed up in just a little bit, so stay tuned to check in what's next. So a quick note about the E70. You can see this mounting point is set back about 6 or 7 inches before that one. So the mounting points are essentially sloped backwards. They're set back about this amount in the car. This lamp assembly, it sits inside the fender. It doesn't bolt to the body. Okay, they're using the same internals that we've seen over and over again on the AL, AFS system. But this is a very unique setup here because of the way that it mounts. So we've been noticing some inconsistencies with the beam pattern because the factory beam pattern, if you take a look at it, it's kind of like raised in the center. It's fairly straight, but on the outsides, you got some flaring going on. Okay, we call this kind of like a mountain cutoff. It kind of goes up and down a little bit. And it makes things look a little bit differently when you're switching to a very thin shield without a high step. Or a slope. In this case, this has a slope cutoff. Okay, so as we rock the lamp back and forth, just imagine it's not set in the housing properly. Okay, now we're about flat, and then we rise down, we start turning clockwise, and as we rise up, we start turning counterclockwise. So it all comes down to the positioning of this lamp inside the fender, essentially. And sometimes it's impossible to essentially set it to optimize the levelness of this kind of system, because not only can you manually level it, it's also AFS, so it sways left and right and it centers off. You know, this is a really tricky model to kind of perfect for that reason, because of the way that this is situated inside of the housing. So, can we turn the light back on? You know, if we set it perfectly straight, all those modules are nice and level. This lamp is actually pointing at the ground, and this is about the height that it's on the car. Yeah, that looks very similar to what it's on the car. So that's actually pointing down, which means this came off a factory car, which means in the car it's actually more like this. Okay, and you can see it starts swaying. It's an interesting setup. Factory channels have been cleaned out of the original permaseal. So now it's ready for what we call the butyl sealant. So it's important to get the channels really clean so you get a good seal, nice consistent layer of seal. And this is what the internals look like of the LCI headlights. There is no bulb entry like there is on the pre-LCI. It's controlled by 2 LEDs on the bottom. That's what controls the halo. So we don't have a halo or a switchback option or anything like that for the LCI E70. The bracket and the internal is very similar, but it is a little bit different. It requires a little bit different amounts of trimming, but we are using that Bosch AFS bracket. Again, these are AL lights, but that is kind of what those brackets go under. And this bracket did require a little bit of trimming. You can see it right there in the corner, and that just makes sure that the AFS has full movement. But other than that, the projector gets trimmed as tight as possible, and you're obviously going to make sure everything is lined up. But essentially you want to confirm that you have AFS clearance and that the projector is set up nicely. The E70 has been completely wrapped up. A lot of work goes into just removing and reinstalling these assemblies. Expect about 4 hours to remove and reinstall properly, especially on the diesel. The diesel has some kind of tank system under here and extra cooler. Extremely difficult to remove those assemblies because you basically have to pull apart the front end. That headlight is seated inside the fender and it comes out from the back. It's really hard to imagine that somebody would design something like this, but the Germans always know how to overcomplicate things. Now the internals of these AFS brackets, the AL brackets, are the same as found on many, many applications. The difference is on this vehicle, the lights mount up to the fender. And there's a point here, there's a point here, same thing here and here. But the way that it's mounted in the vehicle isn't perfectly level. It's flush with the gaps. You know, it's flush with the body, essentially. But when the light is seated inside, it's actually sort of sitting at an angle. And it kind of seats in this assembly, in this housing, in this fender, rather, and it poses a little bit of an issue for retrofitting because of the way it seats inside. And this was the third E70 that we completed in the last few weeks, all on site. And it's hard to tell the difference with the lenses because they're really, really shot. And these projectors, they have an interesting slope to them. And the center is sort of sharp and clear, but the outsides, they flare. And it's really hard kind of to tell. But after we analyzed this, we realized that on this model, especially with the AFS system and the way that these lights seat back into the vehicle, the projectors are actually slightly misaligned. The driver's side is too far counterclockwise and the driver's side is too far clockwise. And this creates a V in the beam pattern. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because the G5-BRT, it's so straight, it has a very small step, so it's rather a flat cutoff, and you can see this small degree of change, and we were scratching our heads in the last few because we set everything up correctly. We did a lot of testing. It's pin straight on the bench over here in the back, pin straight on the bench that we work in the main retrofitting room, and we could not figure out what was wrong with it. So on the last one, I even took the light assembly out, made sure everything was perfect, but sure enough, once it's seated back in the vehicle, this light is sort of at an angle when it reseats, and you can basically tell, like, the light is not seated like this, it's seated like this, and depending on how far up or down it is, there's some washers here, it may or may not create a proper, you know, a level plane essentially. But I'm going to show you how this looks. So the AFS system works properly on these. The lights are warming up. So essentially we built this setup wrong. We purposely made them misaligned in order to get the results that we're seeing here today, which is a crazy thing. I don't believe we've ever actually done that, but it had to be done on the E70, and the E70 is really just a head scratcher. From the design of the assembly, to the way it mounts, to the way it removes, to the way essentially it projects the light on the wall. So We got it dialed in beautifully. It's nice and straight, but what we had to do was actually set the driver's side a few degrees clockwise and the passenger side a few degrees counterclockwise when it was on the workbench, which means you have to go against the retrofitting brackets. You have to open up the holes on the projector, twist the projector. It's essentially going to make it look crooked. You know, and this is the result. And we advise anybody working on an E70 in the future to do the same, because otherwise you're not going to get the results that you're expecting, essentially, if you're looking for a perfectly straight cutoff, one that doesn't match the factory cutoff. The factory cutoff, again, if you analyze it closely, you can see it's actually misaligned from the factory. But anyway, check out how nicely this came out. There's full clarity in the lenses. Before, you couldn't even see into this assembly. Everything was so unclear, and now it's crisp. Okay, it's beautiful. I'll take a lux measurement shortly. We're at 25 feet. A little dusty, it's been sitting in here, but it is really set up nicely. Okay. And the aftermarket lenses, they can cause some distortion. We actually kind of tune them up to work with the aftermarket lenses. In the distance, you'll have that blue color flicker you're looking for. These are the night breaker bulbs. We're hitting about, almost about 700 lux on the driver's side, and passenger side a little bit more in this case, so. But that's what you can expect from the G5-BRT conversion. You're essentially doubling the performance of the stock projectors, and depending on how badly diffused and how badly worn your front lens is, you're going to extract even more performance out of this. So expect 3 times brighter over stock, 4 times brighter, depends on how worn your bulbs are. We've seen 4 to 5 times brighter before. But let us know what you think of this. It was certainly a head scratcher. These E70s, we're offering this as a projector retrofit. We're offering this as a standalone lens swap if all you need is lens swap. But this will essentially give you the performance that you're looking for without any compromises like you see on the factory setup. But we recommend the lights be protected with a paint protection film, so reach out to a local installer, have the clear film installed, you won't even see it, and you'll be able to enjoy your E70 lights for a long, long time. Anyway, guys, subscribe to the channel. Enough talk. This video hopefully was informative to some people, and we look forward to seeing you on the channel. So leave a comment below. Thanks again.